Hello everyone, I hope you're all well. This is the first video I'm filming of 2025 and I'm very aware that it is mid-February, but I'm really excited to sit down. As I say, I just pop in with my videos and I feel like I've actually been waiting for the first sunny day of the year, and today genuinely I feel like I haven't seen sun for ages, and I may be realising as I'm getting older that actually the weather affects me more. And so today, when it was like a beautiful sunny day, I woke up like a spring in my step, way ready to kind of like confront the world in a way that I certainly haven't been in the last week. So I'm excited to kind of catch up with you all and share some of my top reads of last year, talk about my reading year and talk about what I've been reading so far. Every time when it's been a while since I've made a video, I know I should introduce myself and I never do. So very quickly, if you're new here, hello, my name is Claire. I live in York with my husband and 3 cats. And we both love history, we're both massive nerds. My channel is all about classics, history, mainly book shopping vlogs, and just sharing little snippets of life in a sporadic but cosy way. And I hope that if you're watching you'll stick around and watch more. I always feel really cringy doing that, but I am aware that the majority of people who are coming to my channel now weren't who came in 2010 or 2012 when this channel started. So welcome. I document my reading year in my book journal that my mum brought me like 15 years ago, and the elastic is slightly gone, but I think this shows that I'm never going to be one of those people who reads 50, 100 books a year. I've just never done it. Even since when I was at university I kind of read 50, but it's just not my style. I'm a really slow, I'm not even slow, I'm just very distractible. And so I think you can see that I'm kind of here in my book journal, and there's a lot of years yet to put in this, but also in my book journal I don't ever give any opinions. I just write the book, write the author's name, don't even add when I read it because I feel like it would be obvious then that one book has taken me months to read. I do put like a little star on a favourite book, and then I kind of note down like what the different genres I read that year, because that's kind of interesting to see how that pivots over time. But at the beginning of this year I sat down for my kind of like analysis, looking back at what I'd been reading and kind of how I feel like my book journal is like kind of like a tapestry of kind of seeing how I've grown up throughout the years and the type of person that I've come as a result, and also just lined up with the type of books that I was reading. And I just couldn't understand why I hadn't read that much. And then when I was speaking to my mum, I was like, what have I been doing? And my mum made me remember that obviously I had a massive house move and then got a new kitten, had a change in my job, my responsibilities at work quite massively, and that's why. And so 2024 was a bit of a weird reading year, and I think it was weird because the number doesn't really matter to me because I've never been a massive reader and I've never done reading goals because I just know they're not really achievable for the way that my brain works. And I was kind of looking back and I realised actually that it was just like a good year for me is when I read books that become my favourite books of all time. And I think last year I really read one new book that I was like, this will be something that I read over my lifetime. And I just felt like that's not good. Like, other years I normally have like 4 of those books, 3 of those books, even if other books are kind of good around it. But this year, it was like 2024 was just a bit of a mid-reading year, but I think that's because my life was just so intense. I have a kind of a life rule that I'm only allowed one big life event a year, and I'm very aware that you are often it's completely out of your control. A lot of the life events that happen to you happen externally, and this year I just had 3 big ones, and that was not my plan. So I guess it's just a bit of a different year kind of looking back at my reading. So I'll now introduce you to my top reads of 2024, and the first one I added in very quickly because I forgot about it, and that's because it was a reread, which is Emma by Jane Austen. Emma by Jane Austen is one of my favourite novels of all time, and for a long time it was my favourite Jane Austen novel. But last year, or was it the year before? Must have been the year before, I reread Pride and Prejudice, and that was always one of my favourites, but I feel like previously Emma topped it. I read it again and I was kind of blown away by it. So I thought, okay, I need to reread Emma again. I need to know where I stand. I think when you kind of make an identity for yourself and saying that one Jane Austen is your favourite, I kind of had to reassess. And I read Emma again. I mean, I love it. It's so clever, it's masterfully done. The gameplay in this, it's so funny. I feel like this is the cleverest Jane Austen, even though it's kind of silly to say because she's, I think, one of the cleverest writers in the English language. Do I love it more than Pride and Prejudice? I feel like I love them differently. I think they're pretty much equal to me. I have to say, I was blown away by how much I love Pride and Prejudice. That maybe it's moved up a little bit, but I think this is like Jane Austen at her best as a writer. I think this is her being the most masterful, and I feel like I would recommend Pride and Prejudice as the starter Jane Austen. As if you want to have your great first experience, you want to have a great time for your first time, you read Pride and Prejudice. And then when you're ready, and you know, you've experimented a bit, you can then read Emma. But I've been actually rereading a lot of Jane Austen last year. And I feel like Jane Austen for me is one of my, she's one of the writers I go to when I kind of need to be reminded of just how great reading is. And Emma did that for me this year. This Penguin Clothbound Classic is also really special to me because I think it was my first Jane Austen Clothbound Classic, but it was also the one that I had at my wedding. One of our last kind of readings at the wedding, was the last paragraph of Emma. And at the very end, I think it's still here, yeah. So I had a letter from Ariel who read the piece of Emma at my wedding as my maid of honour, and then it's stuck to it now. But on the day we actually took a little bit of the blossom from the Minster Gardens, and she gave it to me, and it's slightly stuck there. But this little letter and the flower that is now attached to it will be in this edition for I think, yeah, my entire life. And so every time I look at it, I just have a really special memory of a time, yeah, me and Ariel together, but also obviously my wedding. There are many points in my wedding where me and Errol said that it looked like we were actually getting married, and I think we would both be okay with that. The next book that I have to mention is Jane Austen at Home by Lucy Worsley. I loved this book. I think, like all of us, love Lucy Worsley. I actually went to see her in York in the autumn, winter, and I literally sat there being like, I want to be Lucy Worsley when I grow up. She was incredible. This book, I think, is one of the best Jane Austen biographies that I've read. It's really accessible as well as being really detailed, and I liked the focus on kind of documenting her life through the movement to different houses, and then also kind of obviously interweaving her novels as well. I just loved it, and I think this is also on Ariel's list of the year. I did have a little bit of a Jane Austen year last year because I went to the Jane Austen Festival for the first time with Ariel to celebrate her birthday with Lena, and we had an amazing time in this little apartment in Central Bath, getting dressed up, and it really felt like we were in a Jane Austen novel, especially when we were preparing to go out in our outfits, and it's really special. But I definitely feel like I kind of forgot that actually I had so much Jane Austen time last year, and I still need to make a video about that because I treated myself in that trip. So if you would still like to see my video from the Jane Austen Festival, please let me know. The next book is definitely one of my new favourite books, and it was probably my top new read of 2024, and it is I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith. This is a book that I'm really thankful for Miranda Mills introducing me to, because I think I would have never have picked it up otherwise. I think it's because, I'm going to be honest with you, especially when I was young, I was allergic to reading books that had children or teenagers in. I think because I was a bit of a pretentious kid and wanted to read all the adult books, and this is always sat in a slight in between kind of coming of age novel. And a bit like I've said earlier, I think I spent a lot of last year reading children's literature for the first time because I never read it. So I read The Secret Garden and The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, and I really enjoyed doing that. But this for me is just one of the best books I've read. I was really surprised by I Capture the Castle, and I think I was surprised by how much I loved it, and I don't know why. I think I just, as I said, I maybe came in with different expectations. I found it so nostalgic and obviously kind of eccentric, but also the characterization was just brilliant, and the whole book was really funny in lots of moments, and it just made me feel like I was at home, especially in kind of the beginning. I felt like it was kind of like a warm hug, this book. But it also, I found really interesting the idea of kind of the different, whether she was actually telling the truth or not, basically, whether kind of you are reading from the perspective of Cassandra, and that becomes very clear as the book goes on, in terms of like where the truth is and kind of how she perceives people and how she perceives kind of people and the things that are going on around her. I found it, yeah, really interesting, but also just such a fun, lovely read as well. And I feel like if you want to read this book, I would like read it on a beautiful spring or summer's day, because it just feels like that to me. My next favourite read is slightly different, and it is Crown of Blood, The Deadly Inheritance of Lady Jane Grey, or Queen Jane. I feel so strongly that we should call her Queen Jane, as does Nicola Tallis, the author of this book. I feel like I knew a lot of the myths around Lady Jane Grey, Queen Jane, and I kind of knew little bits about her life, you know, how educated she was, but I was really surprised by actually how little I did know, and how much of it I just kind of knew as like the kids' history of that, you know, of her very short reign. And I really loved Nicola Tallis' writing. It was actually my first Nicola Tallis book, so I'll be definitely reading more. It was really accessible, it was really enlightening, and I think I was just really happy that she got a full-on book rather than being kind of a footnote in history. What I really liked about this book was, be careful, Sybil. What I really appreciated about this book is that it also removed a lot of the Victorian myths, and I feel like this era is always full of Victorian myths. The Victorians really fucked us over in lots of ways, especially with the history of women. But it kind of reiterated her as actually not just being kind of a pawn in someone else's game, but also being an important and quite powerful player as well in the game of her life. And so I definitely recommend it. So they are all my top reads of 2024. As I said, just a very small reading list this year. But now I'm sitting down talking about them, I do realise there are some real gems last year, even if there are a lot of books that I just didn't really enjoy. And I don't really tend to DNF books, because I just don't read enough to DNF. Like, I just know that I won't move on. And so all of the books I read, they weren't like I didn't like them, they just weren't. There was one that I didn't. In fact, there are two that in fact I did DNF a book this year. I did DNF a book. I'm not going to share which one though, because now I work in publishing, I'm very aware that one day I might work with that author. And so if they're alive and I don't like the book, I tend to keep it a little bit silent, because that is my worst nightmare, of kind of being in a pitch meeting or in a marketing meeting and then realising that I have destroyed the book. Not that I really do that on my channel, because it's not really my vibe, because I don't really have time to think about things I don't like that much. Anyway, what was I saying? So yeah, they're my favourite books of the year. So I did have some good ones, but now I thought I would share what I've been recently reading, because it is a strange and eclectic mix, but I feel like it's probably quite a good representation of who I am as a person. My most recent read was Miss Austen by Jill Hornby, and I'm really excited that I finally got around to reading it, because I think I was sent a hardback of this way back, and I went to like an event with Jill Hornby and John Mullen, and so it's been on my reading list for a really long time, and I wanted to read it before the adaptation on BBC, and I did, and I still haven't watched that adaptation yet, so I'm hoping it's good, because I did really enjoy the book. There are quite a few things that I really enjoyed about Miss Austen. I think the first one is just a characterisation. I think Jill Hornby got pretty spot on, and I think as a Jane Austen lover, and I know so many of you will relate to this, there are just so many nods, like winks to the reader, with characters who are real life figures in Jane Austen and Cassandra's life, but we know that they're also Jane Austen's characters. I also really enjoyed the novels being alive in the books, in the way that you know, they're reading extracts of different works from Jane Austen and kind of referencing the novels, and I think it felt a really busy novel and full of life in lots of ways. And I think Cassandra and Jane Austen, for me, you know, I feel like that is the true love story, and this book is obviously about Cassandra and also protecting Jane's legacy with those letters, and it just really confirmed how I feel about that Cassandra just did the right thing, but also I liked that the letters kind of contained secrets, but also kind of holding up a mirror to both Cassandra and Jane Austen, and also kind of looking at how you write letters to different people, the different truths you tell, the different, you know, the untruths as well, and kind of reconciling those things in one person. So I really enjoyed it. I was just surprised by how much I think Jill Hornby, it's like the dialogue, like I was just surprised at points that it really felt like the character of Jane Austen in this was Jane Austen. And so I definitely recommend, if you want kind of like a light, easy to read book that just feels like coming home with Jane Austen, I'd recommend this. I keep saying I'd recommend, of course I recommend all of these books. I feel like I only really do that on my channel, but I do recommend all of them, so there we are. The next book is what I'm currently, in fact there are 2 books I'm currently reading, but I'll stick with kind of the literary history kind of side of it. So I've recently been going to the Brontë Parsonage. Since I moved to Yorkshire, in fact this year alone I've been to the Brontë Parsonage twice. Once as a normal visit, the second one I went to a specific talk that was done by one of my old university lecturers who I loved, and kind of actually inspired me writing on Charlotte Brontë in my MA thesis, even though that chapter got taken out because my tutor at the University of York said that she felt like I should have a man in there instead, which I fundamentally just, why would you take out Charlotte Brontë and replace her with a man? It just feels like everything Charlotte Brontë was fighting against. Anyway, I'm still really bitter about that. But this lecturer really kind of like, I studied Villette with her, and it was a discussion about the Brontës and sanitation hygiene, which is kind of something that she specialises in, and I thought it was really brilliant. But I also just love Haworth so much. I also, like the Jane Austen Festival, went to Haworth, bought lots of things, and filmed lots of stuff as well. The first time I went was just after Christmas, so it, you know, was slightly kind of, in fact both times were quite dark, which feels kind of relevant. But I also have a video that I could definitely film about going to Haworth and the Brontë Parsonage, even though you're not allowed to film in the Brontë Parsonage itself. Let me know if you'd like to see that as well, because I have all the footage, I just got really lazy in January because I was so busy. When I was at the Brontë Parsonage, I bought many books, including a Charlotte Brontë A Life by Claire Holman, which I've now nearly finished, and I really enjoyed it because actually even though when I was doing my kind of chapter in my dissertation for my MA, I read like Elizabeth Gaskell's biography of Charlotte Brontë, I kind of was reading a lot, because I was writing on Shirley, I was writing a lot about the Luddites, and also just kind of like, yeah, it was just a different type of look at Charlotte Brontë that I didn't do a huge amount of, because I was at the beginning stage of that chapter. I didn't really read other biographies, and so I feel like I still don't know a huge amount about her life, and so I've really enjoyed this, and I just kind of want to reread Jane Eyre because I haven't read that since I first read it. And I'm looking forward to doing that probably later in the year or next year. But I think I just love the Brontës. Like, I love them so much, and I really enjoyed this biography, but I think I might save some of my thoughts till if I sit down and do my video about the Brontë Parsonage. But I've really enjoyed the complexity of her character, especially in her relationship with her brother, Branwell, who obviously I named a cat after, but also her sisters as well. And kind of her force of wanting to be public, just her force of nature, I feel like, in lots of ways. But yeah, I love them. On that note, I am transitioning to a book that I haven't actually read yet, because I really want to read The Tenant of Waterford Hall. I have read it a long time ago, I think actually when I went to the Brontë Parsonage for the first time, which was 10 years ago, and I just feel like I haven't given Anne Brontë enough time. You know, I read Wuthering Heights nearly every year and I love it, and I feel like I love Emily Bronte's poetry, I love Shirley, I love Jane Eyre. I just feel like I don't have a favourite with Anne, and I feel like I just haven't given her the time, the dedication that she deserves. And so this year I am wanting to do a bit of a moment for Anne Brontë. I don't know, Anne Brontë August. And I was just wondering if anybody else would be interested having a bit of a Anne Brontë moment. I want to go to Scarborough where she's buried and just give a bit of dedicated space on my channel as well for Anne Brontë. So let me know if any of you are interested, and also what is your favourite Anne Brontë novel, because I feel like actually some of my close friends' their favourite novel is Agnes Grey, which I find really interesting, and I have really enjoyed The Tenant of Waterford Hall, but I can't really remember it that much. And I know my mum also wants to reread this this year, because we're also planning to do a family trip to the Brontë Parsonage as well. I am going to be going quite regularly to the Brontë Parsonage because they do lots of brilliant talks. So you might be seeing quite a few videos of me there, but hopefully we can have a bit of a moment for Anne. So let me know if you'd be interested. I don't know if it'll be like a dedicated read along because I'm terrible at that, but even if we get people read Anne Brontë together and just share that moment would be lovely. I don't know what that would look like, but I'll leave that with you. If no one comments, then it will just be me. That's absolutely fine too. Now we're going to do the weirdest transition of all time, so bear with me because this is very different. So the book that I am currently reading, I've only just started it, unlike the Charlotte Brontë book, which I'm basically nearly finished with, and it is The Nazis, A Warning from History by Lawrence Rees. And word is very different, but this is very much how my brain works in terms of the slight eclectic nature of my reading taste. One of my favourite history books of all time is Lawrence Rees's book on the Holocaust. It's incredible if you haven't read it. And I feel like recently, with certain political things going on at the moment, I just remembered that I never read his book on the Nazis and kind of the rise and the fall of the Third Reich. And it is mind-blowing how similar some of the rise of fascism in Germany echoes. And so this is a warning from history, and I feel like if there is a time where we need to read this, it's now. But I really like his writing. I haven't actually read a book about this era in Germany or in Europe for quite a long time. I had a bit of a moment during lockdown where I read quite a lot, and I read East West Street, which is one of my favourite books too, which is by Philippe Sands, so I definitely recommend it. This is kind of like quite a short book, but I guess the way a lot of Lawrence Rees is writing, because he's actually got a new book out called The Nazi Mind, he often does like 12 warnings, and he kind of presents his work in that way. And this did actually, I think this went along with a documentary he did at the same time, but it is, yeah, so far it's just really powerful, and I'm aware this might not be the type of books that you're expecting me to bring up and read, but I do tend to read a lot of books about this era, and I really like looking at the legal history, especially with the Third Reich and also the Holocaust, which is quite a lot what East West Street does. And yeah, it's eye-opening, I think, especially at the moment. So I wanted to include this here. The next book is one that I've actually just finished reading. Is also going to be a book that I think no one would ever expect me to read, and that's why I wanted to include it, just because I think it's so different to what I think I even thought I would ever read. And that book is Fourth Ring by Rebecca Yarros. Now hear me out. I work in commercial fiction publishing, and recently these books have just been dominating the Kindle charts. Because of the type of books I work on, I'm constantly refreshing the Kindle charts, and we're also now editorially starting to publish some romantasy. So I realised it was probably time for me to read a romantasy book. So I went into the works knowing nothing about Fourth Ring whatsoever apart from seeing the charts, and I bought it. And I absolutely devoured it. In the same way that very small Claire devoured Twilight. It is definitely that kind of book, and I just became obsessed. It was like an absolute page-turning read for me, and it was also a great release when work was a little bit stressful and I needed some downtime. And one thing, in fact, this year my life goals is to read at bedtime, and it's to get better like sleep hygiene, which I always think sounds disgusting, but to actually get a proper like bedtime routine, just like I had when I was a little girl, where I wind down properly, I read a book. You know, my grandma spent every day of her life always reading before bed, and she lived such a long life, and I feel like we're very similar, so I need to take a leaf out of Betty Fenby's books, and so this book has been just the perfect escapist read to go to bed with. And I think I work in a lot of commercial fiction, well, that's what I work on, and sometimes I think I always try to make books that I read, oh okay, I've got to learn something, and the joy of reading is just sometimes escapism, and I love working on books like that. And so I'm thankful for reading Fourth Ring to allow me to escape to a world with dragons, and also kind of interesting yet anti-war as well. And so there are definitely things that I'd pick out in this that actually I feel like are quite cleverly done, but ultimately it was just an enjoyable read that was addictive, and I needed it at the time. Thinking of Twilight, because this basically it has the same ingredients as Twilight, 100%. They're also releasing special editions of Twilight, and I will be buying them all, because that's who I am, because it's the 20th anniversary. In fact, this year they are bringing out some amazing new editions of several books, and I do want to give a few highlights, because I think if you like, I know that all of you will also want to buy them. The first ones are the re-editions of Virginia Woolf's works in the original Vanessa Bell illustration. Like, they're beautiful hardbacks. I'm so excited for them. I have A Room of One's Own in that because it's a folio, but the Mrs. Dalloway Into the Lighthouse, I will die when I own them, because in every one of my houses I've had the posters of those two books. Mrs. Dalloway in particular, when we moved to this house, Ben was like, it didn't feel like home until we put the Mrs. Dalloway poster up. That imagery on the Mrs. Dalloway is just so important to me. So I'm really excited for that. I'm going to have no money because of these re-editions. I'm also really excited for kind of like the dark romance republishing of Daphne du Maurier, which is really interesting. I love publishing. Like, I'm really glad that I have the job that I do, because I'm really interested by how they're pitching that as kind of dark romance. But they're doing beautiful re-editions of Daphne du Maurier's works, including Rebecca, which I think looks stunning. But I actually haven't read that many. In fact, I've only read one Daphne du Maurier, which is Rebecca. And I really want to read Jamaica's Inn, Frenchman's Creek, and also My Cousin Rachel. And so I think I might buy them because they're beautiful, and I didn't really like my other editions, and I love, you know what I'm like, I love a beautiful edition, even though I'm very aware that actually so many of these editions are actually just really bad for the environment. Again, having worked in publishing, and now see I have a completely different view of a foiled book, sprayed edges, all of that stuff. I just kind of now view a bit differently, but I'm a complete hypocrite because I will be buying special editions of my favourite books until the end of time. I think that is all the bookish updates I have for you. Today I'm just going to spend the afternoon, I need to clean the house, but first Ben and I are going to go out into York, and I really want to get like a nice drink and maybe a little cake, just treat myself before I come back and clean the house. And I need to do a bit of work, but I might do it tomorrow, because I can't really be bothered. Saturday is just not a work day for me. But I do need to do some of it because that's my life. So I think I'm going to relax. I said I was going to relax with a book, but I am currently reading the book about the Nazis, which is obviously never a relaxing experience. But that is what I'm going to do. I have to say that I have been getting a few weird looks reading the book in public, and I've chosen that this is a book that I will read inside, in the comfort of my own home. I mean, I'm a socialist, but obviously not a national socialist, and I'm just worried about how people might perceive me politically, because it's still quite aggressive, obviously. So anyway, I'm going to keep it at home, but I might go out for a nice cup of tea. And I'm just trying to think if I had any other updates. The only other thing I did want to say is that we had amazing snow in York in January, and it was the most amount of snow I've ever seen in York. We had one insane snow in London, I remember, which was incredible, but this is the most snow I've ever seen in York before, and yeah, it was really beautiful. So I'll include a couple of snaps of that so you can look at them, because it just so rarely snows in York that it was such a special experience. And also, on that note, I still need to edit all of my seasonal videos. So I do, every season I film a video, and it's just they're literally just for me, they're just documenting my life, but I need to edit I think 2 or 3 of them now, and I'm aware that no one watches them apart from me, and that's fine, but I am going to try and pop them up because I love looking back at them, because they document so much of my life and so many special moments that you don't always realise are that special. But yeah, the snow was beautiful, so I'm going to stop talking so we actually go out into York and so I can get my day started. But thank you all for watching, and yeah, thank you for sticking around when I'm not around. I really appreciate it, and yeah, tell me what your top book of 2024 was, what you're reading this year, tell me what the weather's like, if you have any snow, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye!